For those of you that are new, maybe you're visiting for child dedications, we have been in a sermon season on the book of Mark. We've been exploring the Gospel of Mark, written by John Mark, and today we are in Mark 4:35 through Mark 6, verse 30, and it breaks down really beautifully. And if you've been with us, you're tracking, you have the alabaster book. It's just a beautiful copy of the Gospel of Mark. It breaks down really, really well, and here is how. The theme from the Gospel of Mark this week, 4:35 through 6:30, is simply this. It's 6 stories broken out, 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and the dividing line is this. There are insiders and there are outsiders. There are insiders that experience what it is like to be with Jesus, and then there are outsiders that lose the experience and the benefits that come along with being with Jesus. And the decision for all of us today is crystal clear. Are you an insider or are you an outsider? Are you with him or are you not with him? And that's the question that you'll have to answer, and you'll be able to answer it based upon the 6 stories that Mark walks us through. It's written beautifully to give us this crystal clear picture of here are 3 stories that show you what an insider experience is following Jesus, and here are 3 stories that show you, if you are an outsider, what you lose. Before we begin, in 1983, S.E. Hinton's wildly popular novel, The Outsiders, was brought to film featuring what would become Hollywood's most star-studded cast of all time. Guys, if you have the picture, throw it up. We have everyone from Patrick Swayze to Matt Dillon, Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, and others who came together to create The Outsiders. Anyone have to read this in school? Anybody? I did. Yes, I did, right? Me too, part of the crew. The story revolves around 2 rival groups, one called the Greasers, who were the outsiders, and they were the poor, the outcast. The name of the book and the novel follows suit. They were the outsiders. They were the Greasers. Here are your Greasers. And then on the other side, you had the socials, referred to as socias for short. And the whole story revolves around these 2 rival gangs that are constantly butting heads until 2 characters, Soda Pop and Pony Boy, go to a movie, and when they're at a movie, they start flirting with some social girls. And the social girls take interest, and they leave the movie theater together, and as they're leaving, the social boys come up, and they see these Greasers with their girls, and they start this fight, and they jump them. And when they jump them, they beat him up really bad. Pony Boy is being held underwater. They're drowning him. And then Soda Pop jumps in, and the next thing you know, Pony Boy wakes up, and when he wakes up, he's laying next to a dead social. So they're freaked out. They go into hiding. Trust me, I'm going somewhere. I promise you. So they run into hiding. And as they get to hiding, they start hiding in this old church, and they're hiding there for a while until Pony Boy finally decides he wants to come clean. He's done hiding and lying, and he's ready to come clean. Meanwhile, this rumble is building up between the socials and the Greasers, and they're going to have one big fight to finally settle the score. And Pony Boy says, I'm ready to turn myself in. So as he's going to turn himself in, the church that they were hiding in catches fire. And inside of the church, there are children that are playing. So the Greasers all run in, and they rescue the children. Yeah, right? And when they do, one of the Greasers named Johnny breaks his back. He winds up in the hospital. They get out. They're heralded as heroes who rescued these children, but they're awaiting trial for murder. And finally, Pony Boy goes to trial, and the rumble happens, and the Greasers win, and Pony Boy is acquitted of all charges. And after he's acquitted of all charges, he finally has this revelation where he realizes there's more to life than fighting and constantly being at war with each other. And he has this revelation, and so he decides to write his story in an essay in his English class. And so he writes this story that happens to be his own story. It starts The Outsiders. The novel starts The Outsiders. This is what one literary professor said: about Ponyboy's essay. He said, the end marks a new beginning of a cyclical universe between socials and greasers that never ends. And then he said this, I thought this was interesting. There will always be insiders and outsiders. There will always, in fact, the whole story revolves around creating another story that creates another story that creates this cyclical universe, that there will always be insiders and outsiders. Here's why that metaphor is very important, because it's really easy to listen to these stories contextually and say to yourself, well, they experienced the miracle and that happened to them and that was part of Jewish history. But the whole overarching message is this: what was an insider or an outsider then makes me an insider or an outsider now. The invitation is the same. Jesus is the same today, yesterday, and forever, right? So the invitation to be an insider or an outsider is not solely delegated to these moments in Jewish history where Jesus walked the face of the planet and did these miracles. The invitation is today. The cyclical universe of insider and outsider continues. So the question we have to ask ourselves is this: am I an insider or am I an outsider? 3 stories each side. Here we go. Number 1, first story, Mark 4, verse 35, Jesus calms a storm. They're on the Sea of Galilee, which is well known as this wind tunnel, where these gusts of wind can all of a sudden swirl and mature into these major windstorms out of nowhere. I've been to the Sea of Galilee. I've seen this, where it is a very unique place that is kind of way down, where it just makes sense. One gust of wind turns into a windstorm. Before you know it, you're caught in a windstorm. That's what the disciples are in. Jesus is on the boat. They come to Jesus freaking out. The whole boat's crashing. The storm is crushing us. What are we going to do? This was Jesus' response. Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Their response was this, as Jesus says, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? They respond to Jesus and say, Jesus calms the storm. Once the storm calms, they look. And what is their response? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Now, usually you will hear that preached in some form or fashion like this. You got to have more faith and God will calm the storms of your life, right? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Jesus got up, he said, do you have no faith? And he calms the storm, and someone will say, even the winds and the waves obey him. You have to have more faith and Jesus will calm your storms. But there's a deeper message happening here in Jewish history. Number 1, Jews were not known for their maritime skills at all. They left that to their Phoenician brothers who were up north. They had no business on the water. In fact, most of their history revolves around incredible fear of the water. They built their history about water based on Daniel 7's vision. This would have been elementary study for a Jew in this time, would have been to know the visions of Daniel and understand the prophecies of Daniel. So here it is, Daniel 7, 2-3. In my vision that night, I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of the great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. That was their history and understanding of the water. When Jews thought of water, they thought of it as the place where the beasts are, where the monsters are. When a storm arose on the water, the fear was, are the monsters going to get us? Are the monsters coming to get us? Couple that with Jewish history, and what is the only thing that they have known about acts of water in the Genesis narrative? Who created land out of the sea? God did. When the children of Israel are fleeing Egypt and they're running from Pharaoh, who parted the sea? God did. I'll give you one more. When Jonah is on the boat and Jonah is rebelling against God, going in the opposite direction, and he finally jumps off the boat and the storm is calmed, who calmed the storm? God did. So what do they know about water? It's the place where the monsters dwell, and it's the place that God controls. When they say, even the winds and the waves obey him, what are they saying? This is God. This is God. This is the one who is stronger than the one space that we have been terrified to go to. Call it monsters of the sea. Maybe for you it is addictions. Maybe for you it is labels. It is hurt. It is past shame. It's broken relationships. Whatever it is, the message of Jesus calming the sea is this: he is stronger than whatever it is in the sea that is waiting to take you down. That he is greater than whatever it is you may be going through. The message of Jesus calming the sea is not you need to have more faith. It is he is stronger than whatever the sea has. He is greater than whatever exists in the depths of the deep that you are afraid of, that you think is going to take your life. He's stronger. And look, this is what drives me crazy. The miracles of Jesus were never a debate in early church history. Like, we have to understand that. The debate about whether or not Jesus did miracles is a very modern argument. You will not find this in church history. The Pharisees, the scribes, the religious leaders all acknowledged the miracles of Jesus. His followers shared about them. His enemies could not deny them. There are archaeological drawings portraying the miracles of Jesus. There are extra biblical texts that corroborate the miracles of Jesus. Even counter-biblical texts from the Babylonian Talmud to the Jewish Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud was an indoctrination document that they gave the captives of Israel so that they could change their theology. And it even corroborates the miracles. The miracles were never a question. The question was this: do we believe them, or do we kill him? Do we receive him, or do we kill him? It was never a question of did he really do this. What do? Over and over. They decide he's got to go. He is doing miracles. He is doing things we cannot explain. This guy needs to go. The question was never did he or did he not do it. The question was, do we receive the strength, or do we kill him? I got a friend who Anna and I went over to his house for dinner one time, long time ago. And we got there, and I walked into his kitchen, and his refrigerator has this giant scrape. I mean, just torn to pieces down the side. And I'm giving him respect, right? I'm like, oh, bro, you get that scratch and dent? Like, way to go, man. You know, like, way to go. And like, anybody have, and his wife looks at me, and she says, oh, yeah, tell him the story about our scratch and dent refrigerator, right? Like, tell him the real story. And me, I'm a fan of scratch and dent. Like, I grew up in a home, my dad was like, you never pay full price for nothing. Anyone got a dad like that? Grandpa may, you don't pay full price for nothing. My dad told me one time, he was like, the day I need another man, he was talking about valet parking. He was like, the day I need another man to park my car is the day I'm going to quit driving. I will park my own car and I will walk. That was my dad, right? So that was my friend as well. He's telling me this story, and he's a funny guy, and he's telling me what happened with his fridge. He said they had this showroom downtown, and they went, and he brought his whole family with him, and his wife's parents are with him, and they pick out the fridge that his wife wants. Like, oh, this is the one that I want. And they're like, okay, and they're going through everything, and then at the end, they're like, okay, would you like to pay the $75 for delivery? And he was like, no, I'll take my own fridge. And his father-in-law chimes in and says, no, get the delivery. He's like, no, I can haul my own fridge. And the father-in-law was like, well, I'll pay for it. And my buddy's like, do you think I'm going to let my father-in-law disrespect me like that and act like I can't pull my own fridge? So he's like, I tell you what, I'm going to drop all you guys off at the house. I'm going to get my trailer, and I'm going to go pick up my own fridge. So that's what he does. Somewhere along the way, he screwed up strapping it down or whatever, and he dumped that thing in the middle of 45 highway. Fell off the trailer, skidded across. He's out there tire flipping it back onto the trailer, right? Gets it back. Look, there is no way I'm showing back up at home with that thing. I'm walking in like, honey, it was out of stock. I don't know what happened. Like, There's no way. He shows up at his house, gets his little two-wheel dolly, and he's wheeling it and I mean, this thing just road rash down the side, and he installs it, and I'm like, so his wife, yeah, she's thrilled, right? But we're looking at him, and she's like, so next time, get the delivery. What's funny about it is this. He had everything he needed to get it there safely, but he was unwilling to receive the help. This is the story of Jesus calming the storm. The one who has the strength to overcome whatever it is that lies in the depths of the sea that you are afraid of, that you are worried of, that has your number, whatever the case may be. Jesus is stronger, and insiders experience that strength. Remember that. What is the difference in insiders and outsiders? Insiders experience strength. Number 2. Next story. Jesus heals a demon-possessed man. You'll see it start of Mark chapter 5, Mark 5, 1 through 7. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of, some pronounce it Gennesareth, this is Gerasenes, or whatever. It's like 7 different translations for this location. Jesus arrived in the region of G, and he's on the lake. He's on the other side of the lake. Verse 2. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Verse 4, whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from the wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Verse 5. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him and bowed low before him. Isn't this interesting? You can almost feel the Jekyll and Hyde of a demon-possessed man, but a man that is running to be set free, but this demon is battling him, and he is running to the only one that he believes can set him free. He falls down on his knees. Verse 7, with a shriek, he screamed, and then the demon takes over. Why are you interfering with me, Jesus? Catch this. Son of the Most High God. Isn't it amazing that the demons throughout, Mark chapter 1, Mark chapter 2, if you've been here the past couple weeks, we see this over and over and over. The demons recognize who he is, and his own people have no clue who's in front of him. I mean, doesn't that make us at least ask the question? Like, if his disciples and his followers and the religious rulers of the day, who should know exactly who's standing in front of him, have no clue, they're completely missing it, yet a demon-possessed man cries out, Son of the Most High God. Jesus will not be called that by any of his followers until his crucifixion in Mark chapter 16. They don't know who he is. And yet the demons do. That's got to cause us to ask the question, right? Am I missing it? Am I missing it? Like, if the most powerful religious rulers, scribes, and Pharisees of the day had no clue who was in front of them, are we arrogant enough to think we've got it all figured out? We know who the insiders are, we know who the outsiders are, and we know who to pass the labels to and everything else. Not here. It's the demons that recognized him for who he is. It's the religious people that were missing what was right in front of their face. So it continues on. Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me. So Jesus asked the demon, what is your name? He says, my name is Legion, because there are many of me. After that, Jesus cast 2,000 demons out of the man into pigs, and the whole herd of pigs runs off the side of a cliff, and they all die. Mark 5, verse 15. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. Catch this is funny. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. You think? If a naked man walked in here with cuts all over him and broken shackles and was going crazy, and we cast a demon out of him, he put clothes on, sat down, opened up his Mark Alabaster book and was like, I'm ready for the word, we would all be like, security? That one right there. Just keep your eye out. It's exactly what's happening. Mark 5:18 through 19. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Verse 19, but Jesus said, no. Go home to your family. If you've been with us the past couple weeks, this is going to be great. And tell them everything the Lord has done for you. Previously, in stories of demon possession that encounters Jesus and they recognize who he is, what does Jesus say to them? Tell nobody who I am. Do not utter a word. Mark chapter 1, Mark chapter 2. Two different demon-possessed people. Both of them, Jesus says, tell nobody who I am. Why? Because they were familiar with him, but when you are a follower of him, what does Jesus say? Tell everything. Tell everything the Lord has done for you and how, this is the ticket, merciful he has been. If you have your alabaster book, circle that. How merciful he has been. What set free the demon-possessed man? It's right here. What sets him free? And tell everyone how merciful God has been for you. It is the mercy of God that sets us free. Grace is God giving us something we don't deserve. Mercy is God withholding from us what we do deserve. We have to understand the difference. Grace is God giving us something we don't deserve. Mercy is God holding back from us what we do deserve. I'm convinced of this. If we would get a deeper understanding of mercy, we would quit doing so many stupid things. Because the stupid things that we continually do are literally us not recognizing the amount of wrath that God has for our sinful nature that we very well deserve. But because of the mercy of God, he does not give us what we deserve. My son, Canaan, it's an ice cream. He's 8, and he's getting too strong. Like, he's at that point, you know, parents, you're going to know this, where like, if he catches you off guard, it can hurt. You know, he's no longer like 3, he's 8, and he's strong. So he comes up to me and he says, Dad, he says, I want to play a game with you. I'm like, okay, cool. He said, I want to play the game, who can hit the hardest? And I'm like, okay, right. And he says, Dad, you go first. And I'm just like, okay, this will be fun. Popping, right? And he goes, okay, my turn. I kid you not. This kid, Mike Tyson, in his prime, cranks all the way around and just hits me square in the, I'm not paying any attention, right in the sternum, just smokes me, and I'm like, and I sit up and look at him, and I said, my turn. Stand right there. I walked back. And he's at this point, he's recognizing, I may not have thought that one through. May have been a problem. Like, all right, stay there. And I went, and he goes, and I stopped right there. And I looked at him, and I said, you deserve that one. I'm not going to give it to you. And that's mercy. That's mercy. If we could wrap our minds around the God of the universe that has the strength, right, to even the winds and the waves obey him. He is stronger than anything we could imagine, who has the perfectly good reason to rain down on us, yet he stops, and because of his mercy, he holds back what we deserve. What do insiders experience? Mercy. 3. This one gets me. Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood. Okay, here's what we have. This is like a movie within a movie. This is like a scene within a scene, okay? You have Jairus, whose daughter has died, and he is approaching Jesus, and he's asking Jesus to raise his daughter. Jesus is on mission. Jairus falls before him. He's like, my daughter is dead. You're the only one who can do anything about it. As Jesus is journeying to Jairus' house to raise his daughter, a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years straight reaches out and touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and because she touched him, she is healed. Now, we'll jump right into the story. Mark 5:27-34. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that power had gone out from him, so he turned around to the crowd and he asked, who touched my robe? His disciples said to him, look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, who touched me? Verse 32, but he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman. This is a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years. In Jewish culture and Levitical code, she would have been unallowed to participate in any religious ceremony. She's bleeding. She's unclean. She would have been labeled unclean. This is a woman who was constantly rejected. This is a woman who was not allowed to participate in societal things. This is a woman who was not fit to be married. This was a woman who was not fit to have children. This is a woman who was rejected by the medical sages of the day, by the religious elite of the day, by the political of the day. She was unclean, labeled unclean, and 12 years of her life was spent under the shadow of her shame because she was completely rejected by society. If she were here today and we were in this day and time, she would have to stand in the hallway and not participate in worship because she's unclean to enter the sanctuary. This is a woman familiar with shame. This is a woman familiar with rejection. This is a woman whose life is categorized by humiliation of something that is happening to her that is private but has been made public by way of her standard. Said, you're not allowed in here. You're not allowed with us. And yet she musters up enough courage to go and thinking to herself, if I just touch his garment, maybe he'll heal me. So you can see her working in the crowd and thinking, this is my last shot, and Jesus is passing by, and she's in the perfect spot, and she brushes her hand against his robe, and the moment she touches it, she feels it in her body. Something has changed. I've been healed. My body's been touched, but then Jesus says, hang on. He turns to the crowd and he says, who touched me? What took over for her in that moment? Shame. Fear. 12 years of humiliation. 12 years of being ostracized. 12 years of being unclean. Be this woman for a moment. Enter into this space for a moment. 12 years. Miracle. Immediately. Who touched me? She's terrified. Horrified. Because she knows what the crowd's been calling her. She knows what the people have been saying about her. She knows what she put at risk. To be unclean and touch someone who is clean could lead to a death sentence. She put it all on the line. And here she is, crumbling under her own shame again. Trembling. Verse 33, guys. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, she is horrified, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. I can't say it without tears. Mark 5, verse 34. And he said to her, daughter, He says to her, daughter. This is a deeply familial Greek word. What he is saying to her is, you're mine now. You're not rejected anymore. You're not labeled with your shame anymore. You're not a product of your humiliation anymore. You are not the woman who is untouchable. You are not the woman who is the problem. You are not the woman who's not allowed through the doors. You're not the woman who's not allowed at the meetings. You're not the woman who's allowed to. You are no longer that person. You are my daughter. He calls her daughter. And then he tells her, go your way. I'll finish the story. Go in, your daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. The reason that touches my heart so deeply, and you guys have heard my story 1,000 times, make it 1,001. I know what it's like to be a fatherless child. I know what it's like. My dad spent half my adult life in prison, and for me, I was this hard, angry, rebellious exterior, but inside I was this lonely, abandoned, rebellious little boy who was crying out to be a son. And Jesus rescued me. How did he rescue me? Spiritual adoption for me. The brokenness of my fatherlessness was redeemed in coming to the Father through Jesus. He said, Luke, you are my son. What does he do here? He says, sweetheart, you are now my daughter. You are part of my family. What do insiders get? What does Jesus do right after this? He goes to Jairus' house and he raises a dead person. What were the top two things that made you unclean during this day and age? Blood and death. You did not go near blood and you did not go near death. Those would make you ceremonially unclean for at least 7 days. Jesus encounters them both, and what does he call them? Family. What do insiders experience? Adoption. Family. You are part of the family now. You have a Father who cares, who will never leave you nor forsake you. You become family. So we have insiders. What do they experience? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Incredible strength. The demon-possessed man was set free from mercy, unbelievable mercy. And now the woman with blood is called what? Daughter, family. What do we experience as insiders? Strength, mercy, family. Now watch this. In 2 minutes, Mark unravels all of that to show us this. 3 scenes. Here we go. Number 1. These are outsiders, by the way. Jesus goes back to Nazareth where his own people didn't even receive him. They would not acknowledge him. Mark 6:4-6, it says, then Jesus told them, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his own family. And because of their unbelief, outsiders, watch what they lose. He couldn't do any miracles among them. They lost the power. They lost the strength. It was no longer there. Their unbelief cost them the strength. Their unbelief cost them the power. He continues on. Except to place a few hands on sick people and heal them. Verse 6, and he was amazed at their unbelief. Next story, Jesus sends out his disciples, and he tells his disciples, when you go out, there are going to be those that receive you. Those that reject you, here's what you do. Mark 6, verse 11. But if any place refuses to welcome you or listen to you, shake its dust from your feet and leave. And as you leave, to show that you have abandoned those people to their fate. Give them what they deserve. No mercy. What do outsiders lose? Mercy. What did Jesus just say? If they reject you, they're outsiders. Let them have what they deserve. You see where we're going here, right? Insiders have strength, outsiders lose strength. Insiders have mercy, outsiders lose mercy. Let's end with Herod. I'll make this quick. Mark 6:14-16. Quick backstory. Herod Antipas, son of Herod the Great, decides to marry his brother's wife. He has an affair. He steals his brother's wife. When he does, John the Baptist comes to him and says, "What is your problem? You are wrong. You are abandoning one woman. You are breaking trust with your brother, and you're having an affair and marrying her." Wife gets mad. She's like, "Don't tell him that. I want his money," right? So then she says, so long story short, Herod is enamored with her and her daughter, and he gives them one wish, and they say, "We want John the Baptist's head on a platter." So Herod has John the Baptist beheaded. Mark 6:14-16. Herod Antipas, the king, soon heard about Jesus because everyone was talking about him. Some were saying, "This must be John the Baptist raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles." Verse 15. Others said he's the prophet Elijah. Still others said he's a prophet like the other great prophets of the past. Verse 16. When Herod heard about Jesus, he said, "John, the man I beheaded, has come back from the dead." New Testament scholar Dr. Mark Strauss says this about Herod's response. He said, "Herod considers the popular speculation and pessimistically chooses the most threatening one. John has been raised." The verb is a divine passive, meaning God has raised him. Herod doesn't just fear retribution from John. His conscience is telling him he has done a great evil and will answer to God. Herod's first wife that he cheated on and kicked out, her dad was King Aretas. King Aretas sent his entire army to destroy Herod's kingdom, killed his army, killed his whole family, and exiled him to Gaul. What did Herod lose as an outsider? His family. He lost everything. Do you see it now? We have got to land this, but do you see it now? Insiders, even the winds and the waves obey him. They experience strength. Insiders, the demon-possessed man was set free and given mercy. We experience mercy. The daughter with the issue of blood, he calls her daughter. We experience family. And what do outsiders deal with? No power. Jesus couldn't do miracles. No mercy. Abandon them to what they deserve. And no family. Herod's sin cost him his family. Question at the beginning is a question at the end. Which are you? Or which do you want to be? Are you in or are you out?